flourish even into eternal life. And so we have to have a proper understanding of love.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living, weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTague. If you ever wanted to ask exclusive access to Straight Answers with Father McTague, each month we'll gather for private live video chat where I'll take your questions and we'll dive deeper into the truths of the Catholic faith together in real time. To learn more, visit thestationofthecross.com.
Welcome back to Rise Right. I'm Sarah Kane, joined by my co-host Jacob Martin Kraft, and here are today's headlines. The Post-Millennial reports Colorado doctors refuse to perform child sex changes despite court order over fear of criminal charges. A Colorado court may have ordered Children's Hospital Colorado to resume providing so-called gender-affirming care to minors, but the doctors tasked with carrying it out have refused. The hospital confirmed it was complying with a court order requiring the treatments to be reinstated, while simultaneously revealing that none of the physicians in its gender clinic are willing to prescribe them.
DHS reports the alleged ringleader of the failed terror attack targeting UFC Freedom 250 is an illegal alien. Abraham Hermosillo Alvarez from Mexico planned, organized, and directed the alleged planned attack. He was arrested by the FBI on June 14th, and IC has lodged a detainer against him. Alvarez failed to leave the country when his B-2 tourist visa expired in 2001, and he was granted DACA by the Obama administration.
Of course. And One America News reports a city's push for facial recognition on public buses ignites debate over security and privacy. Officials in Kansas City, Missouri are preparing to equip cameras on some public buses with facial recognition software capable of identifying passengers who appear to be on a list of banned riders or missing persons.
EWTN reports federal judge says government can deposit money to seize diocesan land for border fencing. Amid a legal dispute, the federal government will be permitted to put down a six-figure deposit as it moves to acquire a large parcel of land from the Diocese of Las Cruces, New Mexico, in order to install fencing and other security measures along the U.S.-Mexico border. Again, this is the Mexican government. The order represents a blow for that diocese, which since May has been fending off the government's attempt to seize the land under eminent domain.
And Red State reports Supreme Court unanimously tosses federal pot user firearm ban as the Supreme Court unanimously struck down a law banning habitual marijuana users from owning firearms. The court ruled the law, which was used to prosecute Hunter Biden before he was pardoned, was overbroad and improperly deprived individuals of their right to have a weapon in their homes.
And just a quick correction, it's the federal government, not the New Mexico state government in that diocesan story. But Zeal reports Kaiser Permanente settles COVID-19 vaccine religious discrimination charges with EEOC. Kaiser Permanente has agreed to implement corrective measures to resolve religious discrimination charges after federal investigators found reasonable cause to believe the healthcare company failed to provide religious accommodations to employees. As part of the settlement, Kaiser agreed to pay $358,000.
And Zeal reports Pennsylvania minor league baseball team cancels Pride Night game after players refuse to wear the rainbow jersey. York Revolution, a minor league baseball game in Pennsylvania, canceled its 11th annual Pride Night game after several players refused to wear those uniforms with the rainbow design. The organization announced the cancellation in an official statement, saying the decision to cancel the game was not reached lightly.
And Just the News reports Education Department, which I thought was going to disappear, but clearly has not yet, says it will cut student loan interest rates. The Department of Education said yesterday it will reduce student loan interest rates by 1% next month for borrowers who are enrolled in automatic payments. Borrowers who are already enrolled in those auto repayment plans do not need to take any further action, and that change will remain in effect through June 2028.
And EWTN News reports that a Pew survey is reporting that the majority of Catholics say Trump is too critical of Pope Leo. Leo's favorability is highest among Catholics who attend Mass weekly at 85%, and lowest among those who seldom attend Mass at 73%. The survey found that a plurality of Catholics say Pope Leo has struck the right balance in his approach to the Trump administration, while smaller shares say he has been too critical or not critical enough. Views vary sharply by party. Among all Catholics, 51% say Trump has been too critical of Leo.
And those are your headlines this Friday, and that was the Pew survey we were referring to in our last half of the show. And just a couple of the details from it I think are interesting. The most important part I found was that among Catholics who attend Mass weekly, Pope Leo's favorability rating, if you want to call it that, is at 85%. It's weird for me to be talking. I find it weird to talk about the Pope.
The favorability rating of the Pope.
Yeah, the Pope. Again, weird. He's not elected by us, people. But he's the people who view him favorably are highest among those who attend Mass weekly and lowest among those who seldom attend Mass at all. And it's a little bit higher among those who attend this monthly or yearly, which is an interesting category, monthly or yearly attending Mass. But
at that point, are they Catholic?
Yeah, there's the
they're
question.
Not living as Catholic. I mean, technically, once you're Catholic, you're always Catholic. You're just a bad Catholic, but
to a certain
still.
degree. Well, you're capable of separating yourself from the church, either officially or unofficially. That is for sure. But yes, this is obviously it's a Pew survey. You have received
an indelible mark.
Yes. There is that point, which is why, as a baptized Catholic, you have a greater obligation on your soul. It goes for the priesthood as well. There's a lot of spiritual consequences to those sorts of things. But again, this is just a Pew survey of almost 2,000 Catholics between May 26th and June 1st. And so now one point that they made is that the favorability is down mainly from Catholics who lean Republican. And that's because they saw this conflict as, the Pope's going after Trump's going after the Pope, and I've got to side with Trump because I like President Trump, that sort of thing. And that's why I thought it was telling that Pope Leo kind of came out and said, no, I didn't mean to be criticizing the U.S. government particularly. I'm just, urging for peace generally, and my speeches in Africa were meant for those countries. They were written long before this blow-up happened, so on and so forth. And again, as you and I have said, Sarah, we can say, okay, in an ideal world, we'd love to have an old medieval-style pope who was just going around excommunicating people left and right and maybe interdicts everywhere, that sort of thing. That satisfies our sense of drama and justice and so on and so forth. It's when it can be for better or worse when a pope is saying
more clarity, less charity.
Yes, let's focus on. Don't let our bosses hear you say that, Sarah. But that's all right. You listeners are our bosses because you are who support our network here at the Station of the Cross. But again, the point is that Pope Leo has made again an effort to say that he's not trying to target a particular administration for a political reason. And again, I think that's why we can see President Trump has backed off from that initial reaction, which was a very Trumpian reaction. Just, go hard on someone when you find them being critical or in opposition to you. And Trump has a history of doing that, of attacking someone at one point and then saying, okay, now we've worked it out, we can work together. The biggest example of this is Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Everyone remembers the little Marco nickname and the water bottle incident and all of this stuff. And then now, of course, he's practically President Trump's right-hand man in the administration. So, again, Trump definitely has that political sense. And I think he'll know that he can figure out ways to work with Pope Leo if Pope Leo is earnestly trying to strike this central role as opposed to just, prevaricating, which I think I do see him as earnest in that. He definitely seems to be in the way that he's trying to govern the church and deal with other countries.
Yeah,
so,
like we talked about in the last segment, it is the whole thing of you have to separate the political sphere from the religious sphere. Sometimes they overlap. And in an ideal world, I would kind of want them to overlap very strongly because I would want the political sphere to simply be the moral sphere, and therefore, the overlap is kind of perfect. Yes. However, the American political lines do not line up exactly with the religious lines, and you have to keep that in mind. So I do think it is quite possible for someone who is more conservative politically to still be very comfortable with where Pope Leo is.
Exactly.
That said, there is so much misinformation regarding Pope Leo on the internet, particularly within so-called Trad Inc. circles, that want to sort of like overly focus on anything that he said that was like that raises an eyebrow, for example, and then completely ignore anything that he said that did the opposite. And I think some of that framing is one of the reasons that we have these problems when people look at Pope Leo.
And the issue is that it plays right into the hands of Democrat operatives like the infamous Christopher Hale, who we've mentioned on the show before, who have a vested interest in portraying Pope Leo as literally the Democrat Pope. And the liberal Pope and Pope Francis II in that sense. And that's what, they'll ignore anything that they say that reiterates church teaching on something like abortion, which Pope Leo firmly condemned in front of the Spanish Parliament, which is not a conservative-leaning parliament. And that those comments get ignored, and it's only about, Pope Leo's taking on Trump. And that's how the political portrayal is working here in the U.S., and too many people want to just fall right into the line with it. Again, if you don't trust the mainstream media, don't believe what the mainstream media says about the Pope. That's a good lesson to take for us Catholics.
Exactly. Yes. That was well-rounded. Yes.
So there's something I want to cover here that is kind of following up on. It's not really related to the Pope Leo story. It's just following up on something that we just had a big conversation about, and I want to give the update because this is about this minor league baseball team. Now, again, Major League Baseball is kind of under, it might be, as we more or less predicted, the federal government is looking into the MLB allegedly suppressing people's
Department
religious...
of Justice is looking into
right?
it.
Yep, exactly. And now we've got this minor league team that canceled the actual baseball game for their Pride Night because several players refused to wear these rainbow jerseys, these pride flag jerseys. Good for them. Yes, indeed. And they're literally, the government, the organization said they're going to forfeit the game. They're going to call it a loss. So they're not just canceling the game itself. They're forfeiting it. They're taking it as a loss because they're forfeiting it. And because they want to hold this Pride Night, they're still holding it as an event that people can go to celebrate Pride, even without the baseball game excuse there. So hopefully that thing's a failure as well without the draw of the baseball game. But good on those players, and hopefully we see this, again, with the help of the Department of Justice, maybe putting a firm hand on this, that we see more and more players feel the courage, feel that inspiration to take this stand.
I do think there's a slide that's happening in a good way.
Yes.
Culturally speaking, in terms of people speaking out. This is sort of how the Overton window gets shifted back, right?
God willing,
is things like this where people say, you know what, no, I'm not willing to engage in that. Or perhaps even it's a reflection of the fact the Overton window has already shifted a little bit. We covered a couple of days ago, and we didn't really focus on it, but we did list it. There's a candidate in Florida, I think it was a gubernatorial candidate, who said that if he was elected, he would entirely eliminate the abortions in Florida, and that would be a priority of his.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I thought of was just think about the shift that has happened such that he's willing to campaign on that.
Yeah.
He's not willing to campaign on, we'll draw the line at 15 weeks or 6 weeks or whatever, and we'll have these exceptions and this and that, and, all kinds of apologism. Instead, you're seeing more acts of public fervence, more acts of courage. And I think it's requiring less courage to kind of come out and give these things. And part of that is the support of the government, the support of the DOJ in areas of active discrimination against people who are publicly Christian, who are actually living a Christian life. And so you kind of do have, as a consequence, is the top-down conversion that you and I are always talking about, Jake. You have this from the top, these declarations of, no, you can't actually engage in mass discrimination of Christians, for example. And because of that, the culture itself is changing. And so, and they are self-reinforcing, right? The culture changes, it makes it easier to make the laws change, it affects the culture. But I do think that some of those bigger changes have to kind of come from the top, and it changes the way that we see these major movements. I mean, to the reverse, you saw that after the so-called gay marriage was made the law of the land. from the top. People's acceptability on the cultural level changed rapidly over the next like 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
As a result of it being normalized from the top.
Yes, it was normalized.
We have to recognize that as well.
Yes, the will of the people is malleable, and it's often malleable from the top. That the culture is downstream of the power in that way, and that's why elections do have consequences. Even if you are someone who has multiple serious disagreements from a Catholic point of view with how with some of the things that the Trump administration has done, you have to also look at the positive consequences that come from the DOJ just being willing to say, we're going to look into this. At the very least, we're going to look into the MLB doing something like this. And it reminds me of another story that we'll cover just on the other side of just reminding you that you are listening to Rise Right on the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network. We are, again, a listener-funded Catholic media apostolate dedicated to proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.
And coming up on our network at 12 noon Eastern Time, check out Ask a Priest Live. Father Paul Bourne of the Archdiocese of Boston will join host Rudy Carlos to answer your questions about the Catholic faith. For more information, visit thestationofthecross.com/askapriest.
And if you're buying or selling a home, there's an easy way to help us out here at the Station of the Cross at the same time. Just check out Real Estate for Life. They have 1,400 experienced and morally grounded agents in the U.S. and in Canada. Visit realestateforlife.org, and you can find a Christ-centered, experienced realtor near you. When you check them out, make sure you mention us, the Station of the Cross. And Sarah, this story that I was referring to is a story out of Colorado. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I knew it. Okay, all right.
Yes.
We're going to the same place. We're sort of mentally connected.
Very much, because I think this is exactly in that same vein of the fact that there is pressure. There is a certain social pressure, a pressure of power over this situation, and the situation being that a Colorado court actually ordered Children's Hospital Colorado to resume providing gender-affirming care to minors. So now this seems like, okay, well, the court's ordering it. People are going to follow along with the court, right? No, doctors have refused because they don't want to get sued. They don't want to get charged criminally because the federal government has made a point of trying to push back against this, and because other courts have sided with detransitioners, with all these other cases, and so they're unwilling to obey this liberal court because higher authorities in the land have tried to push back on it. So you're seeing...
It's really comical because you've got the hospitals like, by policy, this is what we do.
Yes.
At this hospital, we do the transitions, and then every doctor's like, but I don't.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And that's really kind of comical because it means that officially speaking, they're actually in alignment with what this court argued, because the position of the hospital is, yes, we do these, but practically speaking, they don't. And I really do appreciate the fact that we have moved from so many hospitals doing these kind of under the table, trying to hide that they're doing them. We had in Texas, we had Catholic hospitals, Lord have mercy, that were doing them, that were hiding this from the bishop, right?
Yeah.
We've had all these different scenarios. And then here we are, you know, sort of 10 years later, so to speak, looking at the same stuff. We're aware of the damage. We're aware of the fact there was never any medical justification for this, which we knew, but now we have even more data to prove that we didn't have the data before. We've had, you know, the Department of Justice getting involved. We've had... we have the new emergence of detransitioners coming forward, testifying before Congress, right? Explaining just the degree of damage that's been done in their lives, like to their bodies, and also going forward because of their now infertility and so on. And we have all of this. And so now we're in a moment where the doctors are actually afraid. And, you know, forgive me, but those doctors should be afraid of doing stuff like that, because that is a monstrous thing to do to a child.
Absolutely. They should be afraid. And again, because of top-down pressure, because of this again, it's also social, because of people who now feel empowered to sue, people who feel empowered to press charges, that sort of thing. You've got this pressure that causes them to, even if they, again, feel like they agree with it in principle, are not going to do it in practice. That already is a victory on that front. So this is the point of social pressure. It kind of gets into our whole religious liberty discussion and distinction that we often come back to, Sarah, of having the freedom to pursue what is true. That if you can't take religious liberty as this goal in and of itself. You absolutely can't. It's un-Catholic to do that, because then you have no sense of reinforcement of doing what is right. And it's all well and good to talk about how under persecution the faith often is kind of forged in this crucible. We definitely make that point fairly regularly. Sometimes when we're talking about the martyr saints, sometimes when we're talking about these stories from nowadays when there is so much persecution around the world. But the simple fact of and this is a point people have made about secular societies. Oh, well, it means that everyone is choosing freely. They're not feeling socially pressured. But sometimes social pressure, sometimes just the feeling, again, of like a holy day of obligation, that you feel obliged in an extra way to go to Mass on a certain day, and then you will still get graces from attending Mass on that day. So some of that pressure from the church to say, well, no, you're still obliged to go to Mass. And you go and you get those extra graces, even if you're there and you're not really paying attention as best as you can, you're not focusing as best as you can, you are still gaining a little something. And that's all it takes sometimes. Yeah. All it takes to push you to that next level the next time you go to Mass. The next time you think, should I pray a rosary today? Should I do should I pray a Hail Mary today instead of, not praying at all? Like, you never know what that little bit is. So that is also the importance of that other side of things, where you say, no, it's good to have a certain social expectation, a certain expectation, or
the opposite is horrendous.
Yeah.
When you think about it, because we're made with this sense of duty, right? There's this sense of being called to some kind of responsibility, and we thrive when we actually do reach up to that responsibility and meet it.
Yes.
But the opposite of that is the guy who usually the sort of stereotype is the young man in his early 20s who uses lots of marijuana and he plays video games all day, and that's his life.
Yeah.
And we have like this sort of late stage industrialized society that allows him to do that. Mm-hmm. And if he has parents that aren't doing their job, if he has a social structure that isn't doing its job, then they just sort of allow that to continue.
Yeah.
And is he happy? Truly? Not really.
Yeah.
He's just kind of existing in this sphere where he's wasting his life and he's denying his potential, and he's not living up to the things that would actually make him happy, actually accepting a vocation and living up to it.
Yes.
And I do think that we have this society that sort of by trying to be nice and enabling that kind of behavior, that kind of life, and pretending that it's equivalent to, living one's vocation, we actually do a disservice. And that's why you have these really high rates of depression, really high rates of suicide, and they're constantly escalating. That these things are not going away. They're actually continuing to get worse.
Yes.
In part because we have so many young people from broken homes who aren't being told, hey, your life actually matters, kid. Exactly. You actually have value.
Yeah.
You are made for purpose. You have a creator. You're loved by God, and because of these things, you have somewhere that you ought to go, something you ought to do. You ought to be a light into the world, and that's just such a contrast to what we're told.
Yeah, and I think that's a very justifiable criticism to have of what of the disciplinary law of the church nowadays. Is that in too many ways it comes off as a very soft, easygoing parent, that it doesn't require much of you, and whether that be in terms of penance. And what it's encouraging you to do stuff, but on your own. You can make the choice. It's encouraging you to go to Mass more frequently, but on your own. That's your choice. So we're not going to oblige you. We're not going to threaten you with sin. To have more of a challenge is good for people, and people will respond to it. And what you can see is that, okay, look, people are already not following through on this. So why not add that extra bit of challenge to people? And you never know who you might gain. So that's part of the self-searching that I think the church needs to do a little more of nowadays, to see, look, we've tried taking the soft hand approach. We've tried backing off on all these requirements, and it's not really working. I would argue that we see something a little better now than we did maybe in the 80s, maybe in the 90s. That sort of thing that we've seen, again, like some younger priests who are enthusiastic, who are pursuing it because they feel that urge. They're following through on something to pursue even with all the pressure not to. So they have a slightly a stronger sense of their vocation, as opposed to, it being just, oh, well, it's expected that I maybe pursue this and keep pursuing it. They feel that effort to push through no matter what. And so that's a stronger faith. That's faith under seeming persecution, under the persecution of negative secular views of priests and so forth. But we still have not seen, people rise up of their own volition to do things voluntarily, much like you're saying with this kid who's enabled to just veg out. So I think a little bit more of that challenge, and I think that's the reason we've seen some increases in faith is when you have, again, like Pope Benedict's statement about you were not made for comfort. You were, I can't remember the exact quote. I should know it by heart. But you weren't made for comfort. You were made for greatness. You were made to pursue being a saint. That's that kind of challenge is something that younger people especially can respond to. And you may get people who reject it anyway, but you already have people rejecting the soft approach. So this is, I think, a case where the church needs to say, let's take a little bit of let's require a little bit more that's fulfilling. Let's get away from like the requiring paperwork type of angle, which I've heard a lot of complaints about from, I've so many horror stories from people trying to get married or trying to just move from a parish to a parish. Like, let's get away from those kind of bureaucratic requirements and more into spiritual requirements and spiritual challenges.
Jake, it allows us to live more fully as Catholics, identified in the world as well. Because it is, you end up going to your boss and saying, hi, so I have this thing called a holy day of obligation on this Thursday, so I need to get to Mass. So is it okay if I leave early?
Yeah, the church says I have to, right?
Right. And so things like that kind of help to force the faith into the world, which we're supposed to be doing. I was looking at this Kaiser Permanente article that we covered there, and you've got, Christians that were basically being denied their religious exemptions. And I think that one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that it's easier for a company to ignore the religious exemptions, for example, of some religious groups versus others.
Yes.
Like everybody looks at a Muslim worker and says, okay, he can't eat pork, so we're going to do something else for him. Sure. Right? Catholics should be like that. It's Friday, so we can't really get meat for the Catholics. Right? This kind of thing, this is how we, encroach. And I mean that in a positive way. This is how we grow. It's how we spread the faith by demonstrating that there is a higher calling.
Yes.
And that we're willing to live up to it, and other people should too.
Yes, that we take it seriously. And again, it is a Friday, so consider a voluntary, act of penance in that way. And giving up meat it's a pretty simple way to do it. Just have some fish today. But also check out Rise Right on YouTube and join us for our live stream, 6 p.m. Eastern. You've been listening to Jake and Sarah on Rise Right. We'll see you either tonight or Monday morning. God bless you.